Welcome to the Brainstorm episode 65. Tasha, what a week. The future has changed in just a week. We've got Robotaxi and SpaceX achievements, unveilings. You were there with Kathy and Brett. So maybe we'll just start off. Everyone's kind of heard high-level thoughts, but maybe you can share what was missed if you were just watching the webcast as opposed to being there in person.
Yeah, well, first I'll point everyone towards, we have a newsletter piece on this. I wrote a blog right before the event kind of detailing what our thoughts have been, which is really like an amalgamation of what we've kind of learned and gathered over the years, but I think still highly relevant for like their future robotaxi launch. I think that, what did people miss? I mean, I do have a couple points to make around like kind of some things I think that just weren't picked up well in general that you didn't have to miss with the recording, but I feel like were overlooked. But first, I mean, I think being there that, you really got a sense of excitement from the FSD team, from engineers, from the designers working at Tesla surrounding this event. I think, one, they're all people that like clearly believe in the mission and seem genuinely excited to see what our reactions would be. And also we're like really thoughtful in terms of just looking for feedback for people, from people at the event. I mean, the major thing is that Kathy and I rode in the Cybercab around the Warner Brothers studio lot. And so, first, like I'll point it out, for full autonomy, it's a lot more difficult to make something work on public roads than it is in a closed circuit setting. That said, I mean, this is a new vehicle. There's no steering wheel, no pedals, and it works, right? So I think that that's an achievement that I feel like wasn't necessarily maybe as recognized as it should be. I mean, the fact that they can do this in a closed circuit setting, it's like, okay, it's like another step to go on public roads, but it's like basically a prototype vehicle that they were able to accomplish this with. And I think that that's meaningful.
It is pretty incredible, not just on the Cybercab front, but even with Optimus. It shows how good Tesla has become at manufacturing, right? It's like spin up 50 plus Cybercabs as prototypes and Optimus bots that, any other startup out there would take
years,
a fair amount of time, right? It's like to even
right.
get to that level. But then what do you think people missed in the presentation, data point wise?
So first I'll point out, so it was 20 Cybercabs, and then the rest was actually, I don't know if it was Model X and Model Y. I only saw Model Y vehicles there, but so these are existing Tesla cars. So you don't we didn't sit in the front seat of the car. We sat in the passenger seat and behind, that did within this closed circuit lot drive fully autonomously. So it proves that they can do this on the rest of their vehicle lineup as well, which I actually think is really meaningful. What people missed, which you could have caught during the live presentation, was, previously Tesla in their in the autopilot day, which is now a number of years ago, they had talked about price per mile. And I believe they said something around like $1.50. I forget exactly what the benchmark was, but the price that they gave this most current, at this recent event was a lot lower than what they've said in the past. Okay, so Elon said that at scale, it could cost Tesla about 20 cents per mile to offer robotaxi service, and then with taxes and other fees to the consumer, it would be more like 30 to 40 cents per mile. Again, I think that's at scale. They do not have to charge that price at first because you simply just have to undercut Uber. But why is it so disruptive? Okay, well, Uber in Western markets is around $2 per mile. Driving your personal car in the US on average is about 70 cents per mile. And actually our associate Akash just refreshed this work. So great job, Akash. And so when you lower the price per mile, both below ride hail and of driving a personal car, you expand the ride hail market far past what we see it as today for human-driven ride hail. So Uber and Didi, this is like hundreds of billions in terms of market value. A robotaxi could make this like 10 trillion plus in market value if you look at the global market for miles traveled, because at that point you convince people to forego personal car purchases. And in urban markets, this is what we think will be the dominant form of transportation, say in the next decade. So this is something we've been talking about for years, but it's just coming to fruition now. And the exciting part is that it's still in really early days. So Waymo's proved that it's possible. But ultimately, we think that Tesla is the company that is better set up to really scale this type of effort.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then on that front, and I think, just hearing you say that, it's like, okay, we're very confident in an autonomous future. And it's like, if Waymo can do it, we think Tesla can do it. But there is a case where you think Tesla can do it, but Waymo can't do it at the same scale. Can you talk about why that might be the case?
Well, Waymo was first to launch, so let's give them credit for that. And the service works. So right now, if you're in San Francisco, LA, and Phoenix, I know they're launching in Austin. I believe they've announced a couple of other cities for testing. You can get in a car today. Some of these are like gated access, so not all of them are available to anyone when you immediately sign up. But so I've ridden in a Waymo car in 2 cities now, and the service works, right? It does take slightly longer than an Uber to get, but it's a smooth ride. And after, you get in, and after like the initial amazement of, wow, there's no one in the driver's seat, you kind of quickly forget about it. And you can see how any other passenger would just like be looking at their phone the whole time. Of course, I'm like so excited about it that I'm constantly looking out the front and the side windows. But it works. So the way the Waymo has done this is they have chosen a much more complicated sensor suite than Tesla. So the knock against Tesla that everyone likes to make is, okay, they're just using cameras. It's a vision-only system. That's impossible to solve full autonomy. We don't believe that that's true. It's a much harder problem to solve. So Waymo is using LiDAR, radar, and a whole suite of sensors plus cameras. And then, the car is basically having to do the job of deciding, okay, which sensor am I going to trust at this moment? And LiDAR is a system of lasers that gives you a 3D point cloud of what the world looks like. So potentially, this is more accurate than cameras, potentially, because you have to infer with a camera, how far away something is, whereas a LiDAR is a direct measurement of it. But the reality is that, a Waymo car ran into a telephone pole, right? So clearly, like, the system isn't perfect. But if you wanted to launch first, this is probably the way to do it, to use this more complicated sensor set. But in order to scale, Waymo is using, so often with LiDAR, you use high definition maps. You map the area that you want to launch in, and then you have this version of base truth that the car can then check back to in terms of, okay, what's new that wasn't here before that might give me a little bit of information to tell me about what type of obstacle or non-obstacle that I'm looking at here. So that's one additional step. Tesla does not use HD maps. But also, on top of that, like sensor suite technology, Tesla just is a manufacturing company. Waymo has to partner with companies like Hyundai and Zeekr and has to convince them to produce these vehicles and buy these vehicles. Whereas Tesla, they're just coming off the lot for Tesla, right? And that Tesla also already has an existing database that's much larger than Waymo. So the last reported number that we have for Waymo's fleet is 700 vehicles. Could be bigger now, but it was 700. Tesla has millions of cars on the road. So we estimate that they're collecting about 5 million miles a day just in FSD, compared to about 70,000 on Waymo's fleet. That's our estimate. So that just gives you an example of like the scale and the pace at which they're collecting this data, which really matters for coroner cases and for like getting those last steps to full autonomy right.
And I think some other tidbits from the event that were interesting. There was a post on X saying that maybe some of the engineers there said they were hoping to get to 5.5 miles per kilowatt hour, which would be amazing efficiency and somewhat, pretty much exactly in line with what we had modeled. Important for uptime and potential size of the battery. And just, to your point, Tesla's manufacturing, I think they said roughly $30,000 or under $30,000 for the cost of it. Mm-hmm. If it has that efficiency, depending on the range they want, the cost could actually be much lower than that. What are your takes what do you think of the doors? Some people look at them and say, okay, this doesn't make sense for a city. Do you think, this is just prototype and it's cool? Or do you think, we'll have those type of doors come launch?
Yeah, well, let's dig into it. What do you think are the points that people are making in terms of why it doesn't make sense?
I think it's like, why does it not make sense? Is it seems like it goes pretty wide, and it's like if you're in an urban setting, you don't want to block the side, clip the lane, something like that. It's like the Model X, the complicated Falcon door is so you can be in a tight environment. The Robo or the Cybercab, seemed like it took up a fair amount of space.
Yeah, there is some like horizontal plus vertical movement with the doors, and I'm sure you can see that from the photos. What we've talked about internally is one, like the X has to get out of parking spots, but theoretically, if the Cybercab is just for robotaxis, you don't necessarily, when you pick up a passenger at least, so when you actually have to open the doors, you don't have to necessarily be in a parking spot. Like you could drive the car out of that tight space to get to the passenger and get the passenger, maybe walk a few feet, etc. I mean, the other thing, like, I don't know, when I think about New York City, and this is kind of just like anecdotal in my guess, when I look at the kind of wingspan, if you will, when I open the door to a vehicle to get out of it, I don't know that it's significantly like more kind of penetrating into the lane space than a regular door would be, because a regular door just opens horizontally, right? At least this has some vertical movement. So like I would imagine that it's actually possible to make that even like a smaller envelope than a typical door would be. And I mean the other thing is like with bikers and stuff like that,
that's right. This way, instead of flipping over their handlebars, they'll get clotheslined backwards.
Well, it's like to me, I just think of a regular door opened at its full capacity, and that actually seems more dangerous than this for those types of other road users.
And then maybe as we round out this topic, I feel like there's huge difference, right? Tesla typically hosts two different types of events. They host, battery day, autonomy day, and then they host more entertaining showman product unveils. It seemed like the audience or Wall Street wanted a battery day type event, and this was a product unveil. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we knew that this was going to be a product unveil, and that's like a really important distinction. They don't unveil new products at the events that tend to have like a ton of slides and data and information, and they tend to separate those. So we knew that this was a product unveil. Like I'll give it to, some of the people that I think wanted more info. A robotaxi just like in itself is a little bit more complicated than the typical product in that like, there's like a whole software system that has to be behind it, right? It's not just the car itself. But I think that for a product launch, I don't feel like this was actually, more sparse on information than any of the previous ones. They did have a couple key slides, like they talked about the price of the car. We found out that they're planning to offer this to consumers, which is why they would want to build hype around the vehicle. And in fact, I think that could incentivize these third parties to form that then own the fleets of Teslas, because we think long term, not all the vehicles in the robotaxi fleet will be on Tesla's balance sheet. They will be owned and maintained by third parties. So they're getting that going and probably want to get people excited about starting that kind of business. Like, would I have wanted additional information? I always want more data, right? But I guess like I wasn't as disappointed as like the street reaction would suggest. And like furthermore, I'll say that we also saw Uber stock move pretty significantly on this event. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous when you look again at the market opportunity that we talked about in terms of human ride hail versus robotaxis. I mean, it's like, yes, they overlap, but it's not the same market at all. It's such a larger opportunity that I don't think that Uber will be as competitive as like a wholly owned player like Tesla will be anytime soon.
All right, so then let's move on to the other future changing event, the SpaceX Starship 5 launch. Tasha, did you watch it?
I did. It was pretty amazing. The videos. I'd love to get your reaction. Like, was the first of all, like, describe the result and like why this is monumental, and is this what you expected to happen?
Sure. I actually put out a tweet, an X poll, and it was like 75% of people said they expected it to be successful. And in my mind, I was like, wow. I was like, this is just a lot of fanfare for how monumental of a achievement this would be. I certainly was expecting it to be close, but some sort of failure. And what happened was seemingly a total success here. And so the Starship went off. Starship kept going. The booster came back, and it was caught in the Mechazilla arms, and it landed perfectly. Elon posted on X saying, he looked at it, and obviously there are some things that need fixing, but overall it was, in great shape. How monumental is this? This is the future, right? So it's like Falcon 9 reversed bloating, bureaucratically driven cost increases in rocket launch. Then Falcon 9 came in and reset that, and was able to demonstrate reuse that no one thought was possible, right? You had CEOs of rocket companies all through the mid 2010s saying, we've all done the math. This isn't economic. And here, SpaceX proved all of them wrong. And now to continue those rocket cost declines, you need a new ship and you need a new capability. And so by taking some of the mass from the rocket and putting that on ground infrastructure, you really change the economics and how quickly these rockets can be reused. And so, I don't know, it was exciting to see the future of space travel and the space economy happen on the first try. And people say this is flight test 5, so it's not actually the first try, but the first time they've attempted to catch it, they did.
Right, with this specific mechanism.
Right.
So why would they specifically use like these kind of pincers versus something else? Like, I'm curious what made this optimal. Clearly it works.
Yeah. And when it comes to reusability, everyone's tried and mapped out and had plans for different things, right? You have some companies that have tried the parachute approach, and you catch the parachute with a helicopter. You have the propulsive mechanism, which is what the Falcon 9 does. And this being able to catch it is really about taking the weight from the rocket and putting it on to the launch tower. And it is funny. It's like you talk about all of these options and they all sound ridiculous, right? It's like, and yet it worked. And so the other amazing element here is, these are the arms that help stack the Starship on top of the booster anyway. And so this is infrastructure that is multi-purpose. And so that would help with the reusability timeline as well, right? It's caught and it's essentially in place for it to be refurbished, refueled, and then restacked.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the launch mechanism itself or the infrastructure itself is kind of reusable in this sense too. And then let's highlight some of the work that you've done. Like, why care about reusability? What impact does it have on cost, and kind of what like the future capabilities of space travel?
Sure. So right now, the cost per kilogram to low Earth orbit with the Falcon 9 is, it's less than $2,000, but we'll just throw out that round number. A fully rapidly reusable Starship could get down to $200. So that's pretty remarkable. If you look at kind of marginal cost of launch, it could get all the way down to $20. And that's just taking into account essentially the cost to refuel it. So it's like, if these get to airplane level reusability, you're like, okay, we're refueling this and it's $20 per kilogram to low Earth orbit. This really transforms Starlink as well. I think there's a lot of momentum behind Starlink, and people are seeing how valuable it is, especially with some of these devastating hurricanes, and having it be one of the only ways to continue to communicate. The government and SpaceX working together to provide the direct-to-device cellular capability, right? And we look at that. That's a tens of billions of dollars annual opportunity that SpaceX and Starlink are in prime position to capture on. And so, how does that tie back to Starship? They can launch bigger satellites that have more bandwidth and higher power antennas. So more people can use Starlink, and more people can start to text from their phone or maybe make some phone calls. It's really connecting the world in an incredible way.
Yeah. So, essentially it's like, okay, lower rocket costs mean that launches are easier. They're not as, much of a costly event. But it enables kind of like these future applications or existing applications, let's say, like enhances them like Starlink. And then ultimately, like that's what has an impact on us, on everyone. It's like you think of a rocket launch and you're like, oh, well, how does that actually impact me? But it's like this connectivity system has very real impacts on everyone globally.
Definitely. And of course, we can't forget the end goal that's driving all of this, Mars. So Starship is critical in order for humans to get to Mars, the way that Elon sees it. And this is a necessary step along that way. So I was talking with a friend yesterday, and we were discussing and saying, okay, in 20 years, how many people do we think will be on Mars? And it's an exciting conversation to have, especially now that it seems feasible.
And what do you think? What's your answer?
So I said, I think in the 20 to 100 people range. What do you think?
Yeah, I was thinking roughly that, like something, okay, it's like would be, relative to like future capability, kind of a smaller number, but like a very meaningful number because it's like a meaningful accomplishment just to get people up there at all. Right.
Right. It is. I remember being in like second or third grade, and the big question was, maybe there will be water on Mars. And then it's like, there's water on Mars and no one cares. And and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, we could actually make it there.
Yeah. And so, and anything else, like, are there things that people miss that you want to touch on before we head out here? Like what do we not talked about that maybe you want to get across here?
I think what the framing that I like to use is what SpaceX has done with reusability is pretty unheard of just from a competitive standpoint perspective, right? So they reused in the 2015 timeframe. I think maybe the first reuse was 2017. I don't know. Someone will watch this and fact check me. But it's 2024. No one else has a commercial reusable rocket that goes to orbit. So that's pretty unheard of, right? This is technology that's been out there. Everyone's seen it. People have tried to do it. And, 8 years later, no one's doing it. Now, that's not to say that people aren't close. So you have companies, Blue Origin is potentially close. You have Rocket Lab that is on its way. And you have China, which is certainly making progress there. And then before any of them have, executed on that, Starship goes and kind of blows away the economics with a whole new form factor and capability. So I think it's just amazing how hard everyone works at SpaceX and what they're able to accomplish.
Yeah, 8-year lead, not bad. I mean, that reminds me of kind of like over the air updates at Tesla. I mean, they did it like nearly, I want to say, a decade before really other automakers started to make it a reality. So you can do a lot in that time frame to kind of solidify your position in a market.
Yeah, especially if you're continuing to move at an accelerated pace relative to competitors.
Exactly. Yeah. One more thing that I want to make this point, because we always talk about like, and I feel like it's relevant to kind of both of these events. Like Elon often sets really aggressive goals for his companies. And I feel like often the response is like, okay, well, we can't trust him anymore because he's, always late on his own timelines. But he's talked about it before, and I really liked the explanation that he gave. Is that it's actually strategic, because if he wasn't so optimistic, it's like, would his companies today be able to achieve, all that they've done in terms of like pushing the boundary and EVs and space travel and everything? It's like, unclear. So it's like you have to sort of be aggressive and like be a big dreamer in a sense to even accomplish some of this, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's, polarizing figure, right? If you're on the internet, you see lots of things. I felt like after this past week, I can't imagine any engineer out there who wouldn't say, wow, I want to work on the biggest problems in the world and make headway. And it's clear that these are two incredible places to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Wow. All right. Now it's Monday. So we'll see what happens this week. Thanks everyone for joining us. And thank you, Tasha.
Thank you.